The Toxic Crusaders is one of the most underrated kids' television programs of all time, at least when it comes to superheroes. It centers around a scrawny janitor working at a health club named Melvin Junko, who is picked on, tricked into wearing a tutu by a popular girl, and falls into a vat of toxic waste after running away in embarrassment. Why the toxic waste was sitting outside a health club is beyond me. Anyways, these toxic chemicals turn Melvin into a hideously deformed creature of superhuman size and strength. With the help of his trusty mop, now sentient due to the toxic waste, and other superpowered individuals like No Zone, Major Disaster, Headbanger, and Junkyard that were all transformed through various other pollution-related incidents, they join forces, calling themselves the Toxic Crusaders, to clean up the streets of Tromaville, New Jersey, and rid it of all polluters.
Have no fear, Toxie's here. Let go of her, you creep!
Oh, thank you, Toxie.
You're welcome, sweetheart. Now please step aside. A battle against evil is no place for a little girl.
Are you all right?
I'm having a ball!
The Toxic Crusaders were an environmentally friendly team of superheroes, and the style and tone of the series drew its inspiration from the likes of Captain Planet, Swamp Thing, and even the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Toxic Crusaders was also a more kid-friendly version of the live-action Toxic Avenger film series by Trauma Entertainment, known for their low budgets, nudity, and heavily sexualized themes, not to mention intense levels of violence. Toxic Crusaders was a very short-lived cartoon series with only 13 episodes produced. The fact that it was based off such a raunchy R-rated film series may have been one of the reasons it never reached full syndication, but the why behind its demise has never been truly explained, so who knows what really happened.
Look out!
Are you okay, Toxie?
Actually, I'm feeling a little run down.
Regardless, as a fan of the live-action films as well as the cartoon series, which have both obtained cult status at this point, I wanted to take the time to review Toxic Crusaders for the Sega Genesis, just in time for Earth Day, because after all, pollution is Toxie's #1 enemy, and it's time for him to clean up. Toxic Crusaders has you play as Toxie, as you take on Dr. Killamoff and his army of radiation rangers, sent from the planet Smogula, the most polluted world in the universe, in an attempt to take over the Earth. Wielding your trusty mop and accompanied by your little blob of goo, fittingly named Blobby, you battle your way through 6 levels and eventually find yourself boarding a Smogulan spacecraft by accident, which takes you to Smogula, right into the belly of the beast. Over the course of these 6 levels, you'll find yourself up against countless radiation rangers, a variety of Smogulan forces, Dr. Killamoff's henchman Psycho, small green radioactive hamsters, what I can only describe as critters from New Line Cinema, a weed monster, and of course, Dr. Killamoff himself. The only villain from the show I would have liked to see featured in the game is Bonehead. I mean, he was one of the main bullies who embarrassed Melvin in front of the girls, that ended up being thrown in a vat of acid rain by Toxie when he harassed his new girlfriend Yvonne. Bonehead would turn skeletal in appearance and become one of Killamoff's more memorable henchmen. Anyways, back to the game. I find its story to be okay for what it's worth, but it could have been a lot better in all honesty. The whole idea of Toxie finding himself on Smogula is kind of cool, and opens up the ability of showing off some really polluted-looking environments, though a lot of them still look like they could just be on Earth, which defeats the purpose of all this a little bit. The ending of the game downright sucks, let's be real. The final level features a gauntlet with many of the bosses you had encountered up until that point, a staple of these kind of beat-em-up games. After you defeat them all, you find yourself face to face with the ruler of Smogula, Tsar Zosta. Instead of some final showdown or something, all Zosta does is fly out the window and then your allies are displayed on a large television screen. That's it. No explanation, no story text, nothing. I want to know how the hell Toxie gets back to Earth. Guess he's just stuck there now. Toxie isn't the only Toxic Crusader you have access to in this game. You can also play as No Zone, a test pilot who flew through a hole in the ozone layer and crashed into a silo of radioactive pepper, giving him the ability of super sneezing. The other playable hero is Junkyard, a humanoid dog who is the combination of a homeless man and a junkyard dog that were merged together when lightning struck the junkyard's kennel they were both sheltered in that was covered in toxic waste. God, these origins sound crazy when saying them out loud. Anyways, they play the exact same as Toxie, just with different combat animations. You even have the ability to play as multiple characters at the same time in 2-player. The story text before and after every level remains the same with each of them though, so they all refer to Yvonne as their babe, which is just plain weird. Guess she likes to sleep around with all these radioactive dudes. I would get tested though, especially because of Junkyard. He's part dog, you know. Sadly, the other Toxic Crusaders, Major Disaster and Headbanger, are not featured as playable characters, which is a missed opportunity. Why have a game about the Toxic Crusaders when you're not even gonna feature all of them to begin with? Headbanger and Major Disaster are nowhere to be found in this game. It kind of sucks. That's like a TMNT game missing one or two of the turtles. That'd be crazy, right?
That'll be just about enough of that.
Who said that? We did! The Toxic Crusaders!
In the hideously deformed and mutilated flesh.
Come on, bozos, let's rumble!
That means fight!
I know that. I may be psycho, but I'm not stupid.
Okay, so let's talk about the gameplay. Like I mentioned, Toxic Crusaders has you play as one of the 3 main heroes, but I'm just gonna focus on Toxie himself for this review. Unlike the lackluster NES game, which infamously has you lose your signature mop the second you get hit, with the Sega Genesis version, you don't have to worry about that. Mop is at your side for the entire duration. Toxie has special moves he can do when you pick up power-ups that appear when you defeat enemies that allow you to use a cool spin attack and even whack Blobby like a golf ball, which is awesome. There is this one attack that has the mop stretch out all around you, and at first I thought it was a screen clearing move or something, but it didn't appear to be doing any damage. Turns out, it's not an attack at all, and in actuality is part of this swinging mechanic used later in the game. Toxie's mop was sentient in the show and did stretch itself out at times, so seeing that ability used here, even in this capacity, is pretty badass. Mind you, the control with it in some of the platforming sections is a bit awkward, and it takes some time getting used to. Speaking of the platforming, these are some of my least favorite sections of the game. One of the levels takes place at the airport, and it's not very fun in all honesty. There are all these conveyor belts that move you in all different directions. Jumping from one to another is already annoying in and of itself, but when you factor in the depth perception with the platforms in the background, it can become really confusing, and you find yourself falling off all the time. I lost most of my lives here, which is why any footage of later parts of the game were captured with the help of a cheat device. Thanks, Game Genie, and your wish-granting powers. It's not only the airport that has this bad depth perception either. An earlier level taking place in the Tromaville Park has all this water everywhere. It's pretty difficult to maneuver around it, especially when you have to move diagonally and stuff. Not to mention, it's utter bullshit that Toxie just dies by touching water. I guess H2O is his kryptonite. He can't get too clean. Toxic Crusaders on the Sega Genesis is easily the best video game adaptation of this short-lived and underrated cartoon series. I think its bright and colorful visuals embody the look and feel of the show, despite it missing a few key characters like Bonehead, Major Disaster, and Headbanger. As a game though, I mean it's just okay. Even for a beat-em-up, it feels more repetitive with its combat than some of the other ones I've played, especially in the superhero genre. It just feels less strategic and there isn't enough variety with Toxie's moves. It seems lacking. That said, the developers do as much as they can with very little, and the levels themselves do have some diversity. You have regular fighting sections, gunning sections on a rocket skateboard, kind of like in the show, even one on some sort of hovercraft in the heavily polluted waters of Smogula, so there is some variety. Toxic Crusaders on the Sega Genesis is nothing special. The combat is lacking and the game as a whole does get a bit repetitive, not to mention the ending downright sucks. But if you're a fan of the series or the original live-action films, then you'll find some level of enjoyment from it. I know I did. This has been NerdGasm. I want to thank you very much for watching, and if you enjoy videos like these and would like them to become a more frequent thing on my channel, head on over to patreon.com/channelNerdgasm and help out my content by becoming a financial backer. You can even nominate future games and even comics for me to analyze in the future as rewards for some of the tiers as well. If you enjoyed this review and found it entertaining or insightful, please subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon to be notified of all future content I release on here. As always, I will see you in the next one. Take care, and long live that inner nerd of yours.
Guess what, everybody? I wrote a new song about my brave, handsome boyfriend and his 2 new buddies. Listen! Hideously deformed, superhumanly strong. They're the Toxic Crusaders, and they fight against wrong. A 1, a 2, a 3. We're the Toxic Crusaders. We're the Toxic Crusaders. We're the Toxic Crusaders. Of that we're pretty sure of.
Not you, Gesundheit.
We're the Toxic
Crusaders. We're the Toxic Crusaders. Of that we're pretty sure of.